Udra Dadhi Kshiram Ritodakaha Ratnakaras Charatnogham Tatpatnyas Chohur Urmibihi Kshara Siddhu Krita Kshodra Dadhi Kshiram Ritodakaha. Anybody want to try repeating the verse? It's a bit of a tongue twister today. Good practice.
Ratnakarashcharat noghams pat yascha johor urmi bibihi jara sidhu grita shodra darhi shirambrito dakaha.
Prabhu, it's 7, 14, 17.
Okay, I don't want to hold you up, so please proceed, Prabhu.
Okay. Yeah, it's a hard one. These are the ones that strengthen your ability to chant Sanskrit. Anyway, we'll do the word for word translation. It says Ratnakaraha, the seas and oceans. Cha and Ratna Oghan, various kinds of gems and valuable stones. Tatpatnyam, the wives of the oceans and seas, namely the rivers. Cha also. Uhu carried, Urmibihi by their waves. Kshara, the salt ocean. Sidhu, the ocean of wine. Grita, the ocean of clarified butter. Kshaudra, the ocean of sugarcane juice. Dadi, the ocean of yogurt. Kshira, the ocean of milk. Amrita, and the very sweet ocean. Udakaha, water. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is our light in the darkness of Kali Yuga, and by whose mercy only we can understand anything about Krishna, and maybe understand something about the cosmology of this universe. Confusing and controversial though it may be, Srila Prabhupada is our fearless leader and our guide in all things and anything that's worth knowing in this world. So, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. By the flowing of their waves, the various oceans of the universe, along with their tributaries, the rivers, which are compared to their wives, supplied various kinds of gems and jewels for Hiranyakashipu's use. These oceans were the oceans of salt water, sugarcane juice, wine, clarified butter, milk, yogurt, and sweet water. Purport. The water of the seas and oceans of this planet, of which we have experience, are salty. But other planets within the universe contain oceans of sugarcane juice, liquor, ghee, milk, and sweet water. The rivers are figuratively described as wives of the oceans and seas because they glide down to the oceans and seas as tributaries, like the wives attached to their husbands. Modern scientists attempt excursions to other planets, but they have no information of how many different types of oceans and seas there are within the universe. According to their experience, the moon is full of dust, but this does not explain how it gives us soothing rays from a distance of millions of miles. As far as we are concerned, we follow the authority of Vyasadeva and Shukadev Goswami, who have described the universal situation according to the Vedic literature. These authorities differ from modern scientists who conclude from their imperfect sensual experience that only this planet is inhabited by living beings, whereas the other planets are all vacant or full of dust. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshununmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cham Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cham. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusuta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavinibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the first thing I'd like to note, dear devotees, as is described in texts number 15 and 16 and 17, that very similar to the appearance of the description of the appearance of Lord Krishna, which is in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear about how the earth and indeed all the demigods gave abundantly their resources to Hiranyakashipu. It sounds very generous. It sounds very fruitful, especially for a public leader to have access to all sorts of resources which they may employ in the service of the people or not. And in the case of Hiranyakashipu, he chose to not. But rather, instead of offering the shares of the oblations to the other demigods, he accepted them himself. Much like, say, I don't know, health minister in Kazakhstan or some other country where they like to take the people's money and put it into their own pockets. So similarly, Hiranyakashipu is usurping the resources that are meant to be distributed throughout the universe and keeping them for himself. And actually, these demigods are acting out of fear. Fear of Hiranyakashipu's power. Power which was awarded by Brahma. I mean, that's what he wanted. He wanted a lot of power. And now we're seeing the result. So it's actually unlike Lord Krishna's appearance as described in the 10th canto, wherein the earth planet especially, Bhumi Devi, just was dripping with resources. The jewels were naturally coming out from the earth. Usually they're buried very, very deep within. You know, every river was flowing with sweet water. All the trees were producing extra fruits. The rains were falling only at night, and the sun was shining during the day, and everything was just perfect out of ecstatic love for Krishna. Therein, the demigoddess Bhumi Devi was acting out of ecstatic love. But as being described here, it's only out of fear. Fear of Hiranyakashipu's power, which he demonstrated by conquering different parts of the universe already. So naturally, these demigods were, and these Lokapalas, those who preside over different planets, were paying tribute. So, very different mood going on, very different bhava, and yet similar results. And so, there's an important lesson for us in considering what is Krishna consciousness, what are its symptoms. It's not just that we can usurp some material qualities, some sort of prosperity theology, which we hear about in modern American Christianity, that if I am prosperous, it means I am therefore blessed by the Lord as a symptom of my piety. No, not necessarily. Hiranyakashipu is being blessed with all sorts of resources, but he is definitely demoniac. So ours is a different perspective. The only thing that we're concerned about and looking towards is ecstatic love of Krishna. That's how Bhumi Devi was acting upon Lord Krishna's appearance on this earth. Acting out of ecstatic love, she produced excess resources. This is not what's happening with Hiranyakashipu. Anyway, just wanted to get that out of the way. I think it's important to consider. But now on to the juicy part of this verse and purport. It seems like somehow I'm always getting these verses about cosmology. But herein, Srila Prabhupada is making some statements which, as he explicitly says, differs from the modern scientist who conclude from their imperfect sensual experience. This is an axiomatic truth which we must begin with in all sorts of knowledge. We need to have some fundamental, foundational truths from which we can derive other truths. Ours is, as Srila Prabhupada said, the axiomatic truth that our senses are imperfect. This is a good place to start. It's very humble. It's a lot easier to just say that the world is definitely real as I see it. The philosophy of naive realism. It's actually called naive. It's right there in the name. It's a lot easier to just assume that exactly as I see things, that's as they are. And exactly as I've heard from whoever's the pop science spokesman of the day, that just must be what it is. That's a lot easier way. That's one foundational way to do it. Ours is that the senses are imperfect. They are limited in their scope, prone to error, and that is demonstrated, of course, in all the different cosmological theories that have existed and continue to evolve. So let's first humble ourselves before Krishna's material energy. It is bewildering. That's part of the engineering. The illusory energy is part of it. So that we cannot be in control, so that we cannot be the enjoyer. And I think one place where that illusory potency of the Lord is especially clear is in cosmology. There was a time when it was thought by even the European imperialistic scientists, and let's keep in mind, of course, the brutal history of European imperialism and the Western scientific tradition piggybacked upon that imperialism as being forced to become the standard pretty much all around the world in a sort of epistemological imperialism as well. But those Europeans, like Newton, for a long time considered that the universe is itself absolute and static, that everything is just in one place and nothing's really moving. Along came Einstein, who came up with some different ideas that there is some, uh, according to his general relativity, that there is some expansion and contraction, which coincidentally is much closer to the Vedic conception of the universe as expanding and contracting out of the body of Mahavishnu as he lies in the causal ocean in his yoga nidra. But that idea will eventually be replaced by some other idea. Now, people are arguing that there isn't a Big Bang. Some are saying that there's universe going through wave-like functions. Who knows what they'll come up with next? It is humbling to say the least. I'm certainly not qualified to make any conclusions, even on what is the pop science Western perspective of it. But it's humbling to say the least that it's very difficult to wrap our minds around and to wrap our senses around a clear conception of the status of this universe. We should remember that's part of the design. We can't even understand what is ourself. We think that it's this body. We think that I'm this flesh and this blood, and when I pass stool, that's an important part of me that's leaving. We're so bewildered that even the things that are very close to us in the form of this body and mind can trick us, can confuse us, and what to speak of on a huge cosmic level. We're very, very easily bewildered. We should recognize that is part of the design of the universe by the grace of the Lord. Still, also, by the grace of our great acharyas, there is some description of the universal situation in the Vedic literature. And it differs from modern scientists who conclude from their imperfect sensual experience. Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, many, many, many times spoke confidently about the situation of this universe, what this earth is like, our earth planet, what it's like, where it is located, how it is moving, what is the status of other planets like the moon, their locations relative to the sun and to the earth. Prabhupada spoke very confidently about these things. And we should be confident in Srila Prabhupada. We should be confident in the acharyas. We should be confident in the Vedic literature. We should be less confident in those who put most of their faith in the axiomatically limited senses. And even if we can't reconcile some things, even if we find it difficult And if we find it a challenge to our faith, well, I would say to that, good. It's good to be a little challenged and to take that as an impetus to take shelter of the Lord. Because ultimately, even if we could create a model, as we're very excited to see in Mayapur when it is finally completed, even if we can make a model which is 100% flawless, that is absolutely clear in its description, leaving no doubt about the situation of cosmology in this universe, still, it is our prerogative to remember the overarching words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself in the Bhagavad Gita, wherein He says, Abrahma bhuvana loka punarvitano jana. Every place in this world, every place in this universe is temporary and full of misery, subject to inevitable destruction. O Arjuna. That's our perspective. And so if our faith is a little challenged by some of the cosmology presented by the Western imperialists or by the Vedic acharyas and by the difference between them, then I say, bring it on. It's good. Our focus is on Goloka Vrindavan. Anyway, that's where we're going. Our goal is not to have complete conviction in this material world, but to have complete conviction in Krishna. That being said, that doesn't mean we should shy away from the incredible descriptions that are given in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in other literatures. Some descriptions, Srila Prabhupada invited, hold on, Srila Prabhupada's first book published in English is, as many of you know, Easy Journey to Other Planets. Prabhupada began with this cosmology, and he wrote in the beginning of it, I can't remember the exact words, but something along the lines of like an invitation to scientists to please to consider the perspectives, described herein, to consider the perspective of the Bhagavatam and the Vedic literature. He wanted people to look at it. In this way, he had a lot of confidence in it. I can't remember what these exact words, though. I could try to find it later. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada, following in the footsteps of his spiritual master, who was a great astronomer, astrologer, and cosmologist, His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada also commented a lot on, and of course translated, the Vedic conception of cosmology. And in that terminology, we might find a variety of perspectives. Using descriptive words like loka to describe a planet or a region of the universe, and also using descriptive words like dvipa, which can mean an island, to describe also planets, it's inevitable that there can be some confusion. And it might cause one to question whether or not something is lost in translation. Indeed, without being too arrogant here, without being too confident, I would say that yes, it's entirely possible that a lot is lost in translation, as evidenced by the many different devotees who have a couple of different perspectives on the subject, like Maheshwar Prabhu, Dhanavir Goswami, Sadaputta Prabhu, and others, who get slightly different cosmological conceptions from their interpretation of the literature. So, again, this is certainly not my area of expertise, but there could be a lot lost in translation. We like to think of everything according to our conditioning from our schooling as globular planets floating via some sort of gravitational force. But the description in Bhagavatam is that the planets are held up by Vayu, by the airs, by the wind, and that they can't actually fall down, and that this universe does have a top and that it has a bottom, and that at the top are the higher planetary systems, which, like a chandelier, spin the same RPMs but spin slower because of their location, whereas the lower planetary systems, which expand outwards like a wider part of a chandelier, make the same RPMs, revolutions per minute, but spin at a greater speed, being of a larger circumference, and therefore experience time a lot faster. So the Bhagavatam conception is that the universe certainly has a top and a bottom, has fixed locations, and that at its very bottom, there is actually the oceans of destruction, and that the planetary systems are held up by Vayu, by the airs, which travel around, and they can't actually fall. And one of our wonderful pastimes of the Lord begins with that, when the Earth planet fell into the lower region of the universe and had to be rescued by the great form of the Lord Varahadeva. So, in this way, some of the words that are used to describe the planets and the planetary systems can be difficult to translate. An island between different oceans, a dvipa, or a loka, which is more like a planet. Then there are descriptions, of course, in the fifth canto about Bhumandala and Jambudvipa, which is shaped like a lotus leaf, very round and circular and horizontal, being much more two-dimensional than spherical. And on it, the Bharatvarsh, or the earthly planet, is but a section, like a slice of a rather horizontal Bhumandala region, having the Mandara mountain in the middle and other slices or varshas, which are divided by different oceans. Maybe some of you have seen the images that were created, I think first by Dhanavir Goswami and by some others. But again, it depends on certain translations of what words that the acharyas are using, like Shukadev Goswami saying that it is like a lotus leaf. I mean, ultimately, we have to try to translate some words into various languages and to try to get a conception of what things could be shaped like. So, no easy task, to say the least. Again, I must reiterate that I'm definitely not the expert, but I do find it interesting. One other conception that we have to keep in mind, and a problem really, is that in many places in Bhagavatam, I shouldn't call it a problem. It's a glorious opportunity for us to become very Krishna conscious and to think very deeply about what's in Bhagavatam and to confer with other devotees in a Vaishnava Sabha to try to make sense of it and to get clear understanding of it. So one challenge posed is that much of the language of Bhagavatam is allegorical. In fact, even in this verse that we're reading, Tat Patnyas Chohur Urmabi, that here and even in this verse, text number 17, there is allegorical language being used, that the rivers are like wives to the oceans. So not just in this verse, but in many, many verses, there is allegory, there is poetic language. In some places, it's explicitly clear. Most famously, of course, in the story of Narada Muni's story of slipping my mind right now. You all know the one. Uh, what was it? It's completely just slipped my mind. His allegorical story of Puranjana, and in other places as well. Much of the description can be allegorical and not literal. So it just poses more of a challenge, more of an opportunity for those devotees who are very eager to try to make sense of it. So it's not going to happen here and now, dear devotees. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you thought that by tuning in to Little Yashadev Das's Bhagavatam class, you're going to get a resolution of cosmological challenges. Then I'm sorry to say that no, that is not my ability. But to reiterate and to emphasize that this material universe is meant to be bewildering. Daivihyesha gunamai mama maya duratyaya. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that this energy, this material energy, it's daivihyesha. It's actually controlled by him. In that way, it's divine. And it's very, very difficult to overcome. One sense of overcoming is to know something. That's why we accept the Lord as adhokshaja, apaurushaya. We can't fully understand. When we fully understand something, if something is understood from beginning to end, from all angles, from inside and out, then it can be controlled. There's a sense of superiority and dominance just by having a complete understanding of something. And this world is designed so that it cannot be completely understood because we are not the controllers. In fact, even the most simplest of elements seems like every time we're certain that we've understood some fundamental feature of this universe, you crack it open and find out there's a whole bunch of other stuff inside of it. We were so certain for a long time that the atom is the smallest of things until you crack it open, and then there's the protons and the neutrons and the electrons. You crack those open, and suddenly there's the quarks and the phasars and the gluons, all sorts of other things. And then eventually we'll find that there's further still, further fundamental features still. It's just the way that this universe has been designed by the Lord for our benefit. We cannot be the controllers and the enjoyers. And therefore, concomitantly, we cannot have a complete conception of this material world. Daivihyesha gunamai. Mama maya duratya. Krishna says it is impossible to overcome. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayamitam tarantite. But the devotees are interested in completely taking shelter of the Lord, returning back home, back to Godhead, rather than trying to be Lord and Master of this universe by being absolutely certain of its physical and cosmological conditions. The devotee's concern is to go back home, back to Godhead. So let's always keep this perspective in mind, even as we may try to get some idea of our position within the universe. Let's always keep in mind what Krishna said so clearly. Abrahma bhavanaloka punarvitanarjana. It doesn't matter whether you're up in the higher planetary systems and the lower, all of them are places of destruction, temporary and full of misery. The devotee recognizes, like a Disneyland, like an amusement park, we're here to be bewildered. I don't know if all of you know this, but Disneyland is engineered for illusion. They arrange their parks so that you cannot see anything outside of the park. Did you all know this? The rides that they have and the different attractions, they're all made in such a way that they're never too high that you can see outside of the boundary of the park. They want you to be 100% absorbed in that environment while you're there. They engineer all sorts of sensual experiences. They actually pump out certain smells through vents. Um, they remove all sorts of elements which might remind you of anything outside of the park. That's how deep they get into the engineering of the experience of Disneyland and Disney World. So similarly, this universe is designed in such a way to be bewildering. That's not a bug, that's a feature. It's the feature of the Lord because that's exactly what we desire. It's exactly what we want. To be bewildered and to imagine ourselves the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, the Lord's apparent absence from this world, at least to our most superficial, trivial sensory experience, the Lord doesn't appear to be in the room with me right now. That's also a feature and not a bug. Because it's necessary for our desired psychological experience of being independent. If it were constantly evident that the Supreme Personality of Godhead were right here watching us in every single thing that we do, then we could not fulfill our innate psychological desire of being independent. So rather, it is a feature that the Lord's presence in this world can only be perceived by those of a certain consciousness, a certain purity, a level of consciousness. That's part of the feature. It's not a bug. As is said by Shukadeva Goswami in the second chapter of the first canto, what is it? Bhagavat Tattva Vigyanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate. Who remembers that verse? I'm going to get it in just a second. That the Lord can be seen by those who are in the mode of goodness, at least. Evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vigyanam mukta sangasya jayate. That the person who is established in the mode of unalloyed goodness and whose mind is enlivened by contact with devotional service gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. This is not a bug, this is a feature. That the Lord's presence in this universe, in this world, is only perceived by those who are prasanna manaso, satisfied in sattvic consciousness. They can have positive scientific knowledge of God. So, let us remember, the Lord has engineered this world just perfectly. That part should be clear. By the finely tuned qualities of this universe. The universe is perfectly engineered for our life, for our sustenance, and also for our death, and for our sojourn through many, many lifetimes in this world. It's perfectly engineered. And part of that perfect engineering is that it is bewildering. It is confusing. Even our body, even our homes, even our commodities, even our properties, the things that we possess, our possessions, they are bewildering. They're confusing to us. We can't seem to be in control. We can't seem to master them. Like a greased pig, we just can't get a good grip on it. And so, what to speak of the greater cosmology of this universe? We should not be surprised that it is confusing and bewildering, both from the Western and from the Vedic perspective. Ultimately, we are meant to go back home, back to Godhead. That's something that we are meant to be 100% confident about. That is the feature of this universe, to bring us back to that overarching realization, that necessary, conclusive understanding that I'm meant to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, go back home, back to Godhead, and serve the Lord as his part and parcel. It is not necessarily my responsibility and my call to become the master of this material universe. As we can see from people like Hiranyakashipu, that endeavor is fraught with difficulty and ultimate destruction. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Any comments or questions? Don't ask any questions because I probably don't have an answer. But if there's any comments on this fun, controversial subject, please feel free. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I have a small contribution.
Yes, Taraka Prabhu.
uh, with regards to the perception of Krishna,
Sorry, Vishnu?
the fact that he is generally hidden.
Oh,
Um,
I think you've muted yourself, Prabhu.
so sorry. Yeah, there was an incident that occurred back when Srila Prabhupada was physically present. And some of the details are eluding me at the moment. I apologize. But the gist was that the devotees asked Srila Prabhupada how to deal with Christians who were saying that they are seeing God and speaking to God. And the Srila Prabhupada asked the devotees how to answer that. What he asked them for, the quote that would make the facts clear. And the devotees could not answer Srila Prabhupada's question, and he was very unhappy with the fact that they could not do that. He demanded to know why they did not know this verse. And what he quoted was one of the Chatra Shloki verses from Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Tesham sarati yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buriyogam tam yemamam upayanti te, that to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And so his point was that those who are claiming to be in direct contact with God, the criteria is that for that to actually be true, they must be constantly engaged in serving Krishna with love. So it's not so common a condition that anyone at all can claim, I'm seeing God, I'm speaking to God, requires some significant qualification. And that Srila Prabhupada is explaining to be the important qualification, constantly devoted to serving Krishna with love. That's what I have.
Thanks,
Thank
Prabhu.
Thank you,
We're so
Prabhu.
fortunate that we have Srila Prabhupada, that we have all the acharyas, that we have such profound literature, that we have our spiritual masters, and that we don't have to just assume that whatever I hear in my head must be God speaking to me. We can, we have a system of checks and balances, so to speak, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, whereby we can be confident that there is some understanding from the super soul in the heart and not just some mentalness. I remember this woman in New Zealand. She became really famous because she said in her church, God is speaking to me. He's he's saying that I should have the parking spot right up front in the church. And she would go on with all these sort of things. And I mean, it might have been true, but it's just, there's a lot of uncertainty there. But we're so fortunate that we have the gurus and we have the sadhus and we have the shastra, whereby we can be pretty confident actually when we hear something from the Lord in the heart in the form of Paramatma, rather than just imagining things. So thank you for that example. Uh-oh, some digital hands are going up. Yes, Nagari Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Are there other hands? Maybe the other devotee should go before me.
If you want to be so generous, since you're a frequent flyer in Bhagavatam class, you want to let Dasya Prem Prabhu go first?
Yes.
Thanks, Sachi. See you. Wow, Dasya Prem is milking cows. How auspicious. You want to say something, Dasya Prem Prabhu? We're inviting you. All right. Uh, Back to Agari Krishna, I suppose.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much for a very informative class on the importance of hermeneutics, particularly with how, because Krishna has constructed a universe that goes infinite both way, to infinity both ways. From bigger than the biggest, you slice that up, there's still more to speculate about. Smaller than the smallest, you dice that up, there's still more. And in this way, you actually stay bewildered.
Pretty
And
much.
so that same principle also applies to metaphysical speculation. And so you can't really find Krishna through Jnana Yoga or Neti. So thank you for that. So obviously, with that being the context, then Rupa Goswami's aphorism that we actually need to accept the Achinta Shakti of the Lord, and that becomes one's worldview. So human life is very short. And so in order to prosecute it and actually derive benefit, you need to accept belief from a high authority. So my question relates to how we are conditioned to, in modern day society, there is a creed. All societies are constructed with a creed. And so in this purport, the creed that Prabhupada's challenged, the one creed that Prabhupada is challenging, that after the Second World War, what was constructed was that humans don't need God to actually ascend, to escape the constraints of this Earth planet. They can journey to other planets. But even in with this creed, I got the good fortune to talk to a student last week at the program, at your program, every Thursday for Kirtan. She's an
Our
astrophysicist.
program, probably.
I'm a participant. But, I was telling her about that even though NASA says on its website that we are yet to, they've admitted that actually we are yet to have human flight through the Van Allen belt of radiation. So in other words, to go to the moon, right, you need to go through the Van Allen belt of radiation. So what NASA is saying is that actually we haven't gone to the moon. They're admitting it, right? And so I was even telling the student that this is what they're admitting. But the belief, it's so entrenched that she was like, no, what the argument that she was given was an evolutionary one. And that is that because we have found bugs in asteroids that can go through the Van Allen belt, therefore life can go through the Van Allen belt of radiation. And so because we evolved from microbes, then we've done it before. And so I'm like, okay, well, but why is NASA saying that they haven't actually gone through the Van Allen belt of radiation and still having us believe that we don't need God to escape our solar system? So how do you basically, yeah, my question is the process of Krishna consciousness that, okay, Lord Chaitanya says, chant, get the taste, and then you start believing in Krishna. In other words, accepting the creed of Krishna consciousness. The background that's required is a taste for chanting. Or do we just continue like trying to convince people or preaching in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness? Do we still have to do both approaches, even though we can see that some creeds are just so entrenched in people's minds, like that we've gone to the moon, they just can't accept it.
If you're asking for my opinion, yes, we should just preach Krishna consciousness, chant Hare Krishna, take some prasadam, how you been and how's your life? Because the qualification comes through purification by chanting the Lord's holy names, that then one can start to challenge their creeds. I think starting by challenging a person's creed is possible. I mean, Srila Prabhupada did it, but it requires like some serious expertise. The Darwinian creed is very entrenched. The Western cosmological creed is very entrenched, such that even many of our devotees, are definitely believers in it and followers of it. And I think to have the willingness to challenge your conceptions of what this world is like requires a qualification, like is described in that verse in the second chapter, the first canto. Evam prasanna manaso, Bhagavat Sattva. I lost it now. You have to first have that qualification of having purity of mind and contentment and self-satisfaction and sattva guna. It might be that, challenging the creed is a little effective for preaching if someone has that character. Maybe they'll find it very interesting. But I think generally what I've seen, at least statistically, is that first people become attached to Krishna, and then they're willing to shed attachments to other things. And I think that Srila Rupa Goswami has also said something of that to that degree, to that effect. Um, what is it? I can't remember now. And all the other rules and regulations will come. Smaratam vismartavya najatuchit sarvaviri nishedasyor etiore vikinkara. Just become attached to Krishna. Just remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. Everything else will follow. So that's my opinion, and that we should be careful about challenging someone's creed too much. Even if you're very convinced that it is an illusion, still, if they're holding on to it, even if people are holding on to illusions, it's very hard to take them off. Like someone who's addicted to a drug, you can't just go cold turkey. Sometimes you got to wean people off of a drug with a different drug. That's what methadone clinics are for. You can't just take somebody off of heroin or crack. You got to like ease them off with other things. So I think that we should consider that. But then you have guys who are already very open to having their creeds challenged, like Forrest and Corey. Just go for it, you know. They love that sort of stuff. But yeah, it is unfortunate that so much of the Western scientific tradition is completely entrenched, especially in Darwinism. It has to have happened like this. And so even if we don't have evidence of something, it must have happened like this because we're so convinced of this particular Darwinian perspective. And so when that girl is talking about, she said bugs. No bugs have been found on asteroids. What they're talking
Yeah.
about is this overinflated conception that there are some amino acids found on some meteorites, and so that therefore life must have begun with amino acids, a hypothesis which has never been demonstrated or proven. And so she's thinking that therefore it could have passed through these radiation belts. But first, you have to demonstrate that life begins with some chance combination of particular amino acids. Otherwise, that hypothesis is just, again, another Darwinian extrapolation.
Well, she came a little closer in that they actually found bacteria. So it was living bacteria in some of
I
the
think
the
that
the
she's
asteroids.
confused.
Yeah. Anyway, still, it's like the point is that human flight hasn't been demonstrated. Humans, at least the humans we know, so through the Van Allen belt of radiation. Uh, Other celestials obviously enter according to the Bhagavatam. It just depends on your technology. If you have the right technology, you can certainly survive that belt of radiation. But yeah, I guess NASA has us, or at least just universities has us believing that we have the technology. Just like even AI, they're just ascribing consciousness to it and that super intelligence is possible and all this stuff, which again, it's another creed that they're trying to add
Hmm.
to to maintaining society.
Yeah, people have to have faith in something. So I guess a lot of people they just have faith in that physicalist perspective. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Thanks for. I think
Thanks for
that
being.
she's very confused. There's never been any bacteria found in meteorites. That would just completely blow the lid off of so many things. But what often comes up in the news is that they claim to have found some like I said, some amino acid chains, which is not life. Just because there's amino acids in cells doesn't mean that that amino acid is therefore the origin of living cells. That has never been demonstrated. Chemical abiogenesis, it's called, has never been demonstrated. It's never been observed in nature. Prabhupada's postulate was, of course, life comes from life. That's the most natural postulate in our every observation. But again, Darwinism sort of like demands that somehow it must have come by some chance chemical reaction. And now some people, because they haven't ever found it on Earth, they propose what's called panspermia, that maybe it came from some meteorites. And since we found amino acids on meteorites, some really amazing meteorite hit Earth and life began or whatever. So these are the creeds. These are the beliefs that people have, and they're challenged by it, just like we might be a little challenged by what's described in Bhagavatam. The challengingness is built into the universe. That's my point. That's the engineering of this world. You have to be confused. You have to have some doubt in this world. Krishna's designed it like that. Whether you believe this thing or that thing, you're still going to have a lot of doubt. It's still going to be challenged and confused. So for people on my level, I'm just at the chanting Hare Krishna, eating prasadam level. I can't really understand anything else besides that. That's just where I'm at, Prabhu. I'm sorry I can't meet you on your very lofty, your
No,
very lofty
no
level.
problem. You met me. You met me. I don't know if there's another hand. I do have a follow-up question.
I don't know if Dusty Frame's actually there. He's disappeared sometimes. So you go ahead, I suppose. Oh, he is there. Hello, Dusty Frame Prabhu.
Yeah, so Haribo, thanks, bro, for the class. And yeah, I just in terms of our sensory limitations, it's a fact. Like the colors we personally see, those aren't like objective realities. That's just how we perceive them, and
Hmm.
so our whole perception of this world is just it's a totally subjective experience.
It's illusory.
Um, yeah, it's illusory, and it's even like you see something, and then like your retina it's flipped around, and um, whereas another species is seeing a completely different reality. And then the moon, I was thinking the moon, the Bhagavad Gita tells us that uh, the moon actually provides the nourishment for the vegetables, and also if you study like agriculture, it's so much dependent on the placement of the moon.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, it just seems like it's more that lends to the fact that it's something more than just like a big dusty planet. Like certain things will
Hmm.
actually start to bloom or give fruit depending on where the moon is. So maybe one could say that's just like the different gravitational pull, but I think for all that it does for agriculture, it goes deeper than that.
Hmm.
So yeah,
And
I
Prabhupada
think
said that
this
many
these
times, that because the moon gives such nourishment to vegetables, it cannot just be a bunch of dust. In one place, Prabhupada
yeah
said that there's flames on the moon. I don't know, but I hear what you're saying.
yeah. Anyways, that's all I wanted to
Oh,
contribute, and I appreciate you speaking this just so we can kind of think about these things deeper.
thanks for tuning in from the barn. Nagari Krishna, you had one more thing to say? If you
Yes,
have
Prabhu.
time.
Yeah, if there's nobody else, because I don't want to hog the conversation.
We love your hogging.
So my follow-up question relates to um, the as you know in propaganda, the bigger the lie and the more you tell it, the more believable it is, right? So
That's what
now Krishna
Goebbels
consciousness,
said, right? The Nazi propagandist Goebbels. That's what he had always said.
yeah. He also took his notes from Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he was the biggest propagandist. And
Okay.
basically, U.S. society, the way it's constructed right now, is a consumer-based society. It's mostly also from Edward Bernays' work. Anyway, that's just a sidebar. So, yeah, on that point is that okay, Krishna consciousness. It seems like how the Lord creates, it also seems like if you approach it with this consciousness that, oh my God, Bhagavatam, is this like even real? It just sounds like too fantastic and too amazing, you know? It almost sounds like a propagandist, Shukadev Goswami, telling us a really big conception, which if you're a Pashandi or an atheist, it could be like, yeah, Shukadev Goswami is just a propagandist. He's just telling us a big lie. And then Lord Chaitanya comes around and says, you should always hear Bhagavatam every day. And so this Krishna consciousness is just a religion that's functioning on the same principles as propagandists like Edward Bernays and Goebbels, who just say maintain the lie by just hearing it more, and it's a big one, and then therefore you'll just maintain your conception around it. So, how as a practitioner, how do you just keep your consciousness clean of this conception that we are like being tricked into some big thing? Is it that the daily experience that one gets from sadhana bhakti that becomes the basis of your epistemology?
Mm-hmm.
And even the daily experience that we get from Bhagavatam, our conceptions are changed. We're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And then you apply it in everyday life, and then you're like, wow, this actually even reinforces the wonderful effects that I have in japa, because I'm viewing my world, I'm viewing my relationships in a different way. I'm seeing my partner or my friends, my family members as spirit souls. And I'm even seeing, for example, that the relationship, the quality of the relationship is changing, and I'm getting more pleasure, as an example.
Mm.
So, yeah, so how do you just like avoid this idea that we are being lied to
Mm.
uh, in the Bhagavatam?
Wow. I think you hit the nail on the head that we have our personal epistemological criteria. And I think the criteria for everyone is ultimately what gives them the most pleasure. That's what they'll consider the most truthful. And so even Goebbels and his followers, they derived the most pleasure from that particular conception. And that's why they bought into it. And I think that's explicitly the truth for devotees, that we have to accept that something is self-evident and then build an understanding from that. And what's self-evident is that contact with Krishna is pleasurable. Chanting the holy names of Krishna and the association of the devotees is most pleasurable. And Prabhupada sort of made that clear even from the beginning. Chant Hare Krishna and stay high forever. When we talk about a superior pleasure, he recognized that this is the criteria by which one will derive what is truthful. And I don't think he was misleading. I think he was one of the few who really got down to the heart of the truth. What is most pleasurable will ultimately be considered most truthful to a person. And and we should be confident in that. This is the part where I think is very different from the Western perspective, where we're taught to not be very confident in what we know, but rather accept the authority of somebody else. For example, about cosmology or about evolution or about something, most of which the layman doesn't know anything about, but we're told to just accept it and make that your whole worldview. And you shouldn't be confident in what you think or what you see. But the Bhakti Yoga perspective, I think, is quite the different, where we are meant to be confident in our self-evident experience, as is described in the beginning of the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I think this is very important epistemology, wherein it is said in, what is the verse? Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam. Where's that verse? Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam susukham kartamavyayam. Remember that one? Anyway,
Rajavidya,
oh yeah, thank you.
ninth,
Raja Vidya
ninth
Raja Guyam.
chapter.
Pavitramidam Uttamam. It's in chapter 9, not chapter 4. Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam susukham kartamavyam. So here in Krishna is describing, what does real good epistemology look like? When he says this knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets, the purest knowledge, because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, and is therefore the perfection of religion. It is everlasting and joyfully performed. He's recognizing susukham. The pleasure is part of the epistemology. That's part of the measure of truth that everybody does. So try to find the best pleasure. That's one way to determine the best truth. And he says pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means directly perceived. It should be self-evident. We should build our epistemology on self-evident truths, beginning with the pleasure of contacting Krishna by chanting his holy names in the association of the devotees, and developing the realization that one is not this body. That's supposed to be a self-evident truth. We can be told, but we're meant to practice and to realize. That's why Krishna is giving so many descriptions in Bhagavad Gita, but also giving the means of understanding by yoga, by detachment from the material things. So I think in that way, if we apply it scientifically, we can be confident that Shukadev Goswami and our Srila Prabhupada are not like Goebbels or NASA or whoever else is the latest propagandist pitching some new idea for personal profit, but that we can be confident in what we experience in contact with Krishna is the most real. But these are hard questions to ask. It can cause us to really doubt a lot of things. And so a lot of people don't want to ask those sort of questions, would rather just have simple faith, which is great. But as Prabhupada said, simple for the simple, complicated for the complicated. Some of us are a bit more complicated, and we need to really dissect how it is that we know something, how it is that we can have faith in the descriptions of Srimad Bhagavatam, even if it's beyond our sensory perception. These are important questions, and they're great answers. It can really challenge us. And a lot of people, even a lot of devotees, don't want to go down that route. But I think it's all there, even in Bhagavad Gita. This chapter 9, text 2 is a great epistemological criteria. That's
Thanks,
just me,
Prabhu.
Prabhu, but you know even better than me. So you bring us home by telling us.
No, that answers my question. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Really appreciate it.
Hare Krishna. At the end of the day, this world is very bewildering. We can be confident that Krishna can take us home back to Godhead. If we have just that much understanding, then everything will work out just fine. Those who are trying to figure out the construction of the universe, to them I say, Godspeed, and good luck. All right, we're way over time. I think I have to do my other puja to the wife and kids now. So, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Itai go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo.